don't think there's been enough media attention to this and just how dramatic this sort of thing can be. Because when you think about it, you receive a message or a letter through your letterbox and suddenly, you're being dubbed a criminal, even though it's nothing to do with you. Now, you might not think this is a bit of a problem. You could bat it off. You can at a certain age. But if you're a certain age who lives alone and suddenly you're thinking, will law enforcement officers turn up at my door? Can they force their way in? And of course, will I end up going to prison, as the letter says? Then naturally you get worried. This is, of course, the world that we now live in 2024, and this is all thanks to the ridiculousness of the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. As ever, let me explain. Morning, lovely to see you today. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll have a quick wave. I really want you to take a bit of attention to this, though, because it is really serious, particularly if you live in the United Kingdom. Because a colleague of mine who's of a certain age recently, well, about 2 years ago now, informed the BBC that she no longer watches their channel, and no, she wouldn't require a TV license, and naturally so, this was all taken down. But apparently the woman at the end of the phone said, well, you might change your mind. At the cost as it is now, you certainly won't be changing your mind. You get the picture. They've just put it up by £10, I believe. Here's where it gets interesting though, because they've received a bombardment of letters which have basically claimed that unless she pays this TV license now, her house, her home is under investigation. It will be monitored, and apparently they're going to send down detective vans. Well, we all know what they can do, but that's by the by. As I say, this particular lady is a colleague of mine who's of a certain age and has been in the business a long time, so not easily frightened. But you can understand how this really played out. When you read the letter further down, it says you could be liable for a fine of up to £1,000, and enforcement officers may come to visit your home. Now, it's all very sort of may and could and maybe, but nonetheless, if you're living alone and you're of a certain age, it's interesting to note that this is exactly how the BBC operate to try and extract their money out of you. Even though you've told them already numerous times, you simply don't watch the television anymore. Like so many people, they're just watching things online. As I've often said, we've all shifted our focus. And why should we pay for things that we don't truly care about? Woke news, programs aimed at teenagers that nobody's watching because they're watching online. This is just how out of touch, of course, the BBC is. But here's where it gets truly interesting. If you take an area, for instance, up in the north of England, like say Savile Town in Dewsbury in West Yorkshire, that's a predominantly migrant, multicultural area. They do not go and visit anybody there. They dare not go into those communities because they know that these people simply will not pay the BBC licence fee. What the BBC does, you see, is they focus on people who are middle class, who they feel, of course, may have some surplus money, who, of course, may be shamed into buying the TV licence because they wouldn't want their name put up in some public domain. Everybody else can go hang. I know people who live in London who live in a collection of flats that have never received letters like this, simply because it's out of control. They don't know how to find you. You understand? Now, where I wanted to highlight this too is if this is the case for you and you are in the United Kingdom, or in fact, around the world thinking about coming over here, and maybe you think you might have to buy a license, you don't. If you're not watching the BBC, you don't have to buy a license. They cannot get into your home unless you invite them in. They would need some kind of legal aspect letter. And without that, you cannot, they're not allowed in, and they know it. It's whether you crumble or not at the door and suggest they come in. Here's where it gets also interesting. If you've informed the BBC that you've told them via, of course, telephone or email, keep a copy of that because that's really important. And if you can, try and record the message with another phone. Maybe a friend has a mobile phone. Do it for you so you have a record of the time and the date of when you sent it through. Do not be bullied by the BBC into buying something that really is not for you. And in this cost of living crisis, why should you be forced when so many others who come into this country seemingly get everything for free? How important is this message? Very. Please do like and share, and of course keep the comments respectful, but I'd love to know if you'd had a very similar situation. This one was very terrifying for that particular individual. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.